I work a long commute away from home and depend on the train. There were some issues that caused the trains to be cancelled for hours, which left me stranded about 1.5 hours drive from home. At the train station, there were a few others who were all heading to my city, and we decided to split a taxi. The people were Woman 1, we'll call her Lisa. She's heading to my city to see a gig. She was a bit tipsy. Man 1, we'll call him Kyle. Travelling with Lisa, they're not dating, but from their conversations seemed like friends or maybe fuck buddies. He was beyond drunk, and it made me a bit uncomfortable, because he was pissing in a bush and kept making vulgar comments about Lisa's hot cousin. Man 2, we'll call him John. He was travelling alone, and mentioned that he lived in the city. Just moved there, but was in that town we were leaving from, as he just broke up with his girlfriend and he was picking stuff up from her place. Woman 2, who I'll mention later. Woman 2 decides to stay at her mother's house in the town for another evening, so drops out of the taxi ride. That should have been my cue to also drop out. But they just run the taxi, and so I didn't want to ruin it, as they already calculated how much we all needed to pay. I decided to say to Lisa if I could sit next to her in a taxi. She said, I completely understand. Come on, I'll sit in the middle. So the seating arrangement was drunk Kyle sat at the front, me sat on the side, and Lisa sat in the middle. Came time for John to get into the taxi. Mind, from where we were parked, there was no danger to getting in from the other side, as there was no oncoming cars. He opened the door on my side and just stared at me. Then Lisa says cheerfully for him to sit the other side, and she wanted the middle seat to talk to Kyle more easily. John stared at us for about a second more, then scoffed, and slowly walked over to the other side and got in. The ride itself was awkward, as Lisa and Kyle were both drunk and dirty laundry was aired. How I know that they were fuck buddies. Lisa was drinking still, before she finally said she needed to go to the toilet and was desperate. Taximan found a public leisure centre for him to pull into. She got out and went inside. Mistake number 2. I should have went with her, but I just didn't think about it. Normally I go with female friends in restaurants or bars, but because it was a taxi and freezing outside, I just stayed. Kyle and John went outside the taxi to smoke a cigarette. Then John came back in, when we saw Lisa coming out. He scooted over to the middle, and put his hand on my upper thigh and rested it there. Regret number 3, I should have said something, and made a scene, but I just froze completely. Lisa opened the door, looked at John and looked at me, then looked at John's hand on my upper thigh 2 inches away from my vagina. She cheerfully said to him, "Oh, I'm sorry. Please can we switch? I love sitting middle." John looked pissed. He looked over at me, he was still frozen, removed his hand from my thigh, and scooted out to make room for her. He grumbled something I couldn't hear, before Lisa said, "Thank you," and came in next to me. John sat in his proper seat this time, and we took off. Lisa then took my hand and whispered to me, woman to woman, "I'll make sure you get home safely." I was just tearing up and said thank you. Then, throughout the journey, about 4 or 5 times after, Lisa leaned forward to speak to Kyle. John slipped his hand to her seat, so when she sat back down, he would touch her arse. Every time she just giggled and said, "Oh, sorry, I think you're on your hand then." I felt awful because she was in this position because of me. So I apologised and she just repeated that she'll get me home safely, woman to woman. She was very drunk at this point from the exit taxi drinking, so I think she just latched onto that mission. When we got close to the city centre, Lisa asked me where I needed to get to, and I told her the general area. John said he moved to an area that is literally in the opposite direction. His suburb is north, I'm south of the city. He said after Kyle and Lisa got out, "We'll share a taxi together." Despite that making no sense as we lived in opposite directions. I said no, that's fine, but he was insistent. Won't take no for an answer. Lisa was too drunk and crying about how much she loves her dog at this point to protect me. I texted my husband that I was terrified and if he could walk up to come get me. My husband fucking booked it over as fast as he could. After we got out of the taxi, John was getting his bags out of the trunk and I said bye to Lisa and just ran as fast as I could to make it to my husband. We say it all the time, but it needs to be said again. Fuck being polite when you feel scared. John probably latched onto me because I was travelling along with Lisa, with that man. Also, Lisa is right. Girls need to stick together. I should have gone to the toilet with her. This happened to me in February, so a few months ago now. I was at the Greyhound station where I live, on my way back from visiting my parents. It was about 1 a.m, and I was having a little bit of trouble getting an Uber. I live near a relatively big city, so there were always taxis around, and there were several outside of the bus station. So I walked up to one and asked if he had any passengers. He told me that no, he could take me. I told him where I lived and asked him if he could roughly estimate how much it would cost. I'm broke. He told me he'd give me a ride for free. When he told me that, I was already half in his car, and that made me freeze, with literally 1 foot in and 1 foot on the pavement. I asked him if he was sure, because I wanted to make sure that that's what he actually said, and he also had a very thick accent, so I wanted to be sure that I hadn't misunderstood him. He assured me that he did in fact mean that he would drive me for free. He very politely noped right out of there, making up something about my friend coming to get me after all, which I have no doubt he saw right through. I got my suitcase and went back into the building, got the security guard and told him what happened. I felt a little dumb telling the security guard that this happened, because at that point, I was thinking he was maybe just trying to hit on me rather than hurt me. It just come off as a bit creepy. I did have a very weird feeling. Because of this, I decided not to trust any of the other taxis outside and called for one instead. I even requested a woman, because the encounter made me feel really icky. It was late at night. I'm a 21-year-old female travelling by myself. I was just very paranoid. Well, as I was waiting right outside, the doors for the taxi I had called, the driver drove right up to me and stuck his arm out of the window, showing me a fistful of cash, saying he would pay me to get in the car with him. When I say ran back to the security guard, I know that this wasn't like the most dangerous situation, like he never pulled a weapon or tried to force me to get in the car, but I truly believe I would have gotten hurt if I'd gotten in that car and driven away with him. I told my girlfriend and roommate as soon as I got home, and they both agreed, as well as saying that maybe he wasn't a taxi driver at all. Where I live is right off a major highway and a major human trafficking hotspot. So maybe it was just a guy pretending to be a taxi driver to pick up girls, travelling alone. I don't know. It left me pretty spooked. I bought my first house in 2003, and I was over the moon. Shortly after moving in, two of my neighbours began joking with me about the ghosts in my house. Well, I thought they were joking, so I just played along, pretending I'd seen one, and it was no big deal. As time went on that summer, I met more and more of my neighbours, and they all brought up the same topic. Finally, an elderly woman on the block, who was quite kind and friendly, told me a story after I'd asked her. I knew she wasn't going to screw with my head, which is why I asked her in the first place. Turns out, the previous owner purchased the home and never lived there because she said it was haunted. Sounds in the night of footsteps and sobbing, and glimpses of a man sitting in the kitchen covered in blood. One of my neighbours helped with the renovations of the house, and said that he was putting up drywall when he felt something lift up his dreadlocks. Though I've had paranormal experiences before, it had been years, and by then I just chalked it up to night terrors. One day I went to a small neighbourhood video store to rent a movie. I had to fill out a form with my demographic data and my credit card info. The owner of the store looked at the form and said, "Oh my god, you live in that house?" I asked her what she meant, and she explained that her former employee had committed suicide in my house. She came to the house as soon as she'd heard that the house had been taped off by police as a potential crime scene. She told me that he had just moved into the house with his partner and called his mom because he wanted to invite her over to meet his partner and come out to her. This was in the early 90s when being gay was a big deal. His mother already knew he was gay because he bought a house with a man and disowned him right over the phone. That same week, he received a letter from a HIV testing centre stating that he'd tested positive. This is when HIV was a death sentence. He then sat at the kitchen table, ate a bowl of cereal, and shot himself in the head with a revolver. Since then, she's had multiple paranormal experiences in the store, with videos flying off shelves and even levitating off of them. The most I've experienced is sounds at night. Sounds of Cheerios being poured into a bowl. I don't eat cereal. And sounds of sobbing in the kitchen. I often awaken to both. I remember my grandmother saying, when the dead come to you, they want something. Perform an act of charity in their name and pray for them. So I did. I sat down at the kitchen table one night and lit a candle, and told him that each night I would recite a novena prayer for him before I lit a candle. On the 9th night of the first novena, to St. Anthony, patron saint of lost souls, I heard uncontrollable sobbing. I felt a strong presence of grief and despair, and the sound of hyperventilating breathing, as though someone couldn't catch the breath. I sat in the presence of this, knowing it was not malignant, but rather a connection of intimacy and compassion, of which he was in need. For 45 days, I said a novena prayer before I lit candle for his soul, and had a mass said in his name. A few times I had awakened to feel his presence standing over my bed, but knew it was not a malignant presence. This still happens from time to time, but less and less frequently. I was about maybe 5 years old when my parents decided to follow the typical Chinese stereotype of pushing me to play an instrument. Not just any instrument though, it had to be piano or violin. I decided on violin, mainly because every other girl in my family already had piano lessons, so I wanted to be a bit different. Since my parents didn't have a great grasp on English, they wanted Chinese-speaking instructors, which made for quite a few impractical situations, given how rare they are. My first violin teacher did not perform house visits, so we had to take the train for about 40 minutes to see him every week. He was also pretty harsh and had little patience for screw-scoring 5-year-old violinist, so my parents and I decided to try and find a new instructor. Enter Mr. Chan, a violinist who I would estimate to be in about his mid-30s. His price was cheap, and he also made house visits, which we were pretty happy about. Mr. Chan was a softly spoken man, and as a kid, I thought he was the nicest person in the world. Whenever he came by, he would always give me a piece of candy and hugged me when the lesson was over. There would be a few things that he did that made me feel pretty uncomfortable though. He often looked at me with these smouldering eyes. As a kid, I thought maybe that's just what he looked like. But at times, it creeped me out because it felt like he was staring into my soul. Also, when instructing me, instead of telling me something like, "Now put your finger on the E string," he would just tenderly move it for me. If there was any opportunity for him to touch me, he would always do it. Moving my fingers, adjusting my arms and head for posture. All of these things I brushed off, mainly because I was a kid who didn't know any better. After all, he was a great violin teacher, and I legitimately learned a lot from him. One day, Mr. Chan stopped coming to lessons and we had to get a new teacher. I cried and threw a huge tantrum because I thought he was the nicest guy ever, and I missed the candies, but they refused to explain why he left. Years later, when I was 12, my family decided to break the news to me about what happened. Apparently, Mr. Chan got arrested for molesting one of his violin students, another girl who was about my age. I wonder if he charmed her in the same way. So from 4th grade to the end of 5th, roughly, I lived in this kind of shitty apartment building. It wasn't like drug dealers at my door shitty, but it wasn't great. So one night I'm lying in bed, listening to staticky country music from my old radio while trying to sleep, when I hear a loud banging from somewhere. I couldn't pinpoint exactly where it was coming from at first, then I realised it was the apartment above us. It sounded like someone banging on the floor. Much to my annoyance, I turned down my radio and listened again. I heard the neighbour's little girl, about 6, crying, and she kept banging on the door. Out of tiredness and annoyance, I stood up on my bed and banged on the ceiling. She stopped. Next night, same thing happens. I hear the banging, turn down my radio, and bang on the ceiling. This goes on for 3 days, communicating with this little girl through banging on the floor or ceiling. On the 4th day, she keeps banging and crying and screaming. It was super late at night, so I don't think anyone else heard. It was like someone was ripping a cat's fur out one by one. I banged on the ceiling to see if she was okay, and everything went quiet for a second. I banged again, and after a few seconds, she starts crying again, when I hear this super loud bang, like someone's just dropped a cinder block on the floor from 10 feet up. Everything went quiet after that, and I didn't see her or her mom ever again. I don't even see them move out, but I know they did. I don't know if there's something wrong with the family, like if the mom was abusive or anything, but it was weird. And I hope that little girl is okay. From the 4th to the end of 5th grade, roughly, I lived in an apartment building. It wasn't all that nice and it was very crowded, but we didn't live there for that long. Now, that the backstory is out of the way, my friend who lived 2 floors down, we'll call her Effie, would come over a lot and we would go exploring around the halls. It was a super quiet building despite all the people packed in, so Effie and I would take off our shoes and walk around the halls, knocking on doors and running or stupid kid things like that. One day we came across a hall we'd never seen before that led to an emergency staircase. There was a heavy metal door with a small glass window. Right in the corner there was a small circular dent that spiderwebbed outward, as if someone had tried to shoot through it. Creepy as hell already. So Effie and I heaved the door open with our tiny 9 and 11-year-old noodle arms and examined it. Just as we get into this pitch black staircase, we hear this blood-curdling, inhuman shriek, and we hightailed it out of there. The door slammed shut and we ran back to my place. The next day we brought a tape recorder and some flashlights. We opened the door as quietly as we could and waited. There wasn't a sound. We looked at the window from the inside, and it really did look like a bullet hole. Just before I was about to say something fell from the very top of the staircase and shattered at the bottom. That sound was followed by another shriek and loud pounding footsteps. We ran again and didn't go back. A few days later, Effie and I were walking around our building and I asked her about the tape recorder. She said she thought her mom threw it away because she couldn't find it. Literally at that exact moment, we heard a clatter and just a few feet ahead, the smashed tape recorder was on the ground, dropped from the balcony of the highest apartments. We both looked up and there was a very brief, we would have missed it if we'd waited a moment longer, flash of a face in the sliding glass door. I was once with my friend taking pictures in the woods right before sunset. We got some great pictures and decided to watch the sky change for a while. We got to talking and suddenly it was dark. We figured it was best to head back. As we were walking, I noticed that it sounded like there were footsteps behind us, but my hearing isn't all that great and my friend wasn't saying anything, so I brushed it off. After a while, I took out my knife. It's only from when I'm in the woods, don't come for me. And told my friend that what I was hearing. We stopped walking and the footsteps stopped. My friend wanted to go, but I told her no. Let's wait and listen. We didn't hear anything and were about to leave when we heard a twig snap and we booked it. We ran down the path and down this dirt hill. It was at a super steep angle. My friend got down okay, but I fell and dropped my knife. I was going to grab it, but we heard something crashing, so we kept going. When we got to the bridge, I stopped because there was a streetlight and people in the parking lot. We heard nothing. I even went back for my knife and heard nothing again. It totally could have been some kid messing with us, but it was pretty scary. Some other weird things like that have happened in those woods, but this was by far the creepiest. Let me preface this by saying I'm not the most observant human in the world. I'm usually in my own little world and busy planning the rest of my day before I have a chance to enjoy the moments I'm currently in. I'm actively working on this because I'm aware it makes me an easy target. Not to mention it makes enjoying life to its fullest impossible. Anywho, I don't live in the best part of town. Certainly not the worst, but we have our fair share of shootings, stabbings, and drug-related issues. That said, I feel pretty safe in my apartment complex, as we're in a little nook off a main road, and all of us neighbours know and watch out for each other. To be honest, we're a pretty good little community. A couple of weeks ago, I came home from work, and as I pulled into a parking space, a woman who I'd never seen approached my car. I'm pretty caught off guard. I don't like people approaching me. Hell, I don't particularly like people and talking to people. She started saying she needed a ride. She needed to go to a storage unit just down the road. At this point, my mind is racing, trying to even think of a storage unit nearby. I'm kind of doing the thing my poor deaf grandmom does, where she smiles and nods while this girl is talking about what she needed to take her stuff to a storage unit and she's pregnant. But I have no clue who the hell she is. I just got home and I have to take my dog out and I have things I need to do. That is literally all that is going through my head. Because I had my afternoon planned out and now this lady is talking to me and I'm getting stressed because I have a hard time telling people no. Because I'm terrified of disappointing people. Next thing I know, a loud, deep voice snaps me from my mini internal freakout. "You doing alright, Haley?" Thank God our property manager had been watching and saw what I was looking uncomfortable. He informed her that she and her friends, who I had not even noticed were hiding between buildings near the main entrance, needed to leave immediately. So I wonder what would have happened had I let this girl in my car. Would it have been a totally normal good deed? Or would I have gotten carjacked and ended up getting myself killed? I don't know, but the fact I didn't pay attention in my own backyard and noticed there was a group of 5 people that didn't belong, just blending in, gives me the willies. So, moral of the story, I need to pay better attention and get worked up over the right things. So, my fiance and I have been on the lookout for a kitten to accompany our 3-month-old kitten we have already. We searched and searched until one day he said to me, "Let's look on Craigslist." So I did. We found the perfect one. Well, the only problem was that it was 2.5 hours away from our home. I inquired about it around 10:30 p.m. I know it's late, but almost immediately I got a response. She sounded very nice over text and asked me to see where I lived, so that she would feel settled about the kitten living with us. She also insisted on going to their house. I know, I should have just dropped it. At the time, I thought nothing of it, so I sent them a video. We set up a time for the next day to meet. Next day came. I wasn't going to take my fiance, but he insisted on coming with me because he wanted to be my protection in case, since Craigslist is sketchy. So we drove 2.5 hours on our way there. As we're on our way, I was texting this girl that we would get there on time, and she responded, "Great, see you then." We arrived at the home, me in the driver's seat and my fiance in the passenger seat with the window down. I texted the girl and got no response. I called, no response. I ended up calling 5 times and texting her in the course of an hour, and no response. I went up to the house and knocked on the door, nothing. There was a car in the driveway, but no response from the number on the door. We got there at 6:30 and waited until almost 8. Nothing. The neighbour came out asking what was wrong. I said I'm here since I inquired about a kitten. She said, "A kitten?" I said, "Yeah, it was on an ad on Craigslist." She said, "No one has kittens in this home though." I showed her the ad and she said, "Oh, I know them. They are very sketchy people and they don't own any cats. I just helped them move their furniture yesterday." So I said, "Well, on their ad it says they have to get rid of their kittens since their new place doesn't allow pets." So the neighbour said, "That's impossible, I have a dog. So does the next door over." I immediately found this creepy and assumed the neighbour was also in on something, since it was too creepy and I was feeling anxious. I thanked her and left along with my fiance. Literally, immediately when we pulled out on the street, I got a text from the girl saying, "I'm just now getting your messages. Something must be wrong with my phone. Did you still want the kitten, or no?" I didn't answer and we headed back home. What I don't understand is, they didn't get any money from me, but they asked me to show up, not knowing I'd be with my fiance. I had a bad feeling about it. What did they want from me? This happened about 8 years ago, when I lived in an apartment building in the downtown area of a mid-sized US city. It was around 11 am. I would normally have been up and about for hours, but on this day I decided to sleep in for a while. If I'd been awake, I likely would have had my door propped open a few inches to allow the air to circulate, as the smells from the hallway could get stale and musty and linger inside my apartment. So my cat and I were being lazy asses this day, and we both jolted awake by a very loud, abrupt rumble. I heard a man's loud, angry yell, and to me at the time, it sounded perhaps like noise from the construction site across the way. Maybe someone had slipped or dropped something heavy on their foot. It was all but a moment, but it was enough to encourage my cat and I to finally get up out of bed. I went about my morning, made myself some breakfast. I had a fairly large set of windows that overlooked the street. At one point, while I was cooking, I saw a series of police vehicles show up, which included what I'd call a paddy wagon and a detective vehicle. They were blocking the driveway to the parking lot, which was right beneath my window, so I had a perfect view of everything that was going on. I remembered the noise I'd heard about an hour earlier, so I thought there must have been some kind of incident. It was downtown after all, so I wasn't exactly surprised. A small group of lookers formed across the street. I could tell whatever they were looking at was well out of my view, so I just continued to observe from my vantage point. At one point, I saw a man on a stretcher being wheeled into either the paddy wagon or an ambulance. I can't recall. He had oxygen on his face. He was shirtless, and his chest area was heavily bandaged. By then, I figured there must have been a shooting in the garage below. Scary, but I still didn't think too much of it. After the police and Lucky Loos, I went about my day. I went to take my trash out later, but a police officer was standing at the end of the hall by the trash chute. I went up to the third floor, but same deal, so I went back to my apartment with my garbage still in hand. Later that evening, I tuned into the news, hoping I'd hear anything about what had happened. My mother and grandmother actually lived in the same building. I was the only one who'd heard the noise, but we were all interested in learning what went on. Finally, we see footage of our building, along with an image of a bike that had been ditched and maybe a bloody shirt. According to the news report, a man with a warrant was stopped by police and took off on a bike. I've read different accounts that say that he stole the bike and took off on. I've also read that the police weren't even after him, but he freaked out and ran when we saw them. I'd be apt to believe that bit, considering the warrant was for a misdemeanor. Unfortunately, there's less info on the story these days, outside of one local source, and a short clip on ABC News. Either way, the man ended up at my apartment building moments later. He ran inside the building, which makes the fact that I slept in that day and did not have my door open all the more serendipitous. And in a last-ditch attempt to evade police, he decided to jump down the trash chute. On the way down, he triggered the trash compactor and was crushed to his death. That was the noise I'd heard. The rumble, the man's yell, the building shake. I heard a man die in the most awful way. The only thing I can say is that since I don't know what it was I was hearing at the time, it fucks with me less. My mind doesn't associate the two events. It all happened so fast. My mum and grandmother had their own inputs. They were down in the garage a little later when the incident occurred. They had no knowledge of what went on, but my grandmother said she saw the maintenance guy, really nice dude from Central America, walking by. She said he had a really intense look on his face. The news had said that the body's victim had been found by a building worker, and there were only 2 guys and a housekeeper or 2. I'm sure it must have been him that found the body. I moved out months later. It was more just time to move up in my living situation, but I will say I had a difficult time taking out the trash for a while after that. I went to my grandfather's house with my family. I was spending time with my cousins when my aunt asked me if I can get dye stuff for food in her apartment because there was none in my grandfather's apartment. I say yes, plus it will make me hang out for a bit. So I asked my cousin, who's 3 years younger than me, 15 years, to accompany me. On the way, we discussed about everything. Then as we prepare to enter the building, a man, in his 40s, wearing dirty clothes and stinking of alcohol and tobacco, comes forward to get in there too. He let us go first, we say thank you, and we go in the front. So we go up the stairs, but inside of me I really did not feel well. Without knowing why, I was afraid and stressed. Yet my cousin pretends like there's nothing, and discusses as if the man is not there. So I play the game. You should know my aunt lives on the top floor, and that this is the time there was no one in the apartment. So we talk while going up the stairs, and I always have this unease in my stomach. The man is always behind us. While we're talking, my cousin's saying something that really shouldn't be said. I don't even know why she says this. There's no one in the apartment, right? Then I whiten and look at my cousin with a look that means she really screwed up. Apparently she didn't feel the discomfort I had. We arrive at the door of the apartment. The man is still not that far from us. I fasten to open the door and bring my cousin and me inside, then close the door. I blow and argue with my cousin. She replies by saying that I stress for nothing, that the man is simply here because he lives here, or that he goes to see friends and that it happened to be on the top floor. That's when I realise I might have reacted badly, and that my cousin may have been right. So we go to the kitchen to get the dye stuff, except that we hear a strange noise, and it's coming from the door, and then I realise that I didn't lock it. I walked to the door to quickly close it and beckoned my cousin to stay in the kitchen. But it was too late. I see the doorknob and the silhouettes of the man who were behind us. Livid, I didn't know what to do. The man opens the door. I regain my senses and tell him to get out of here quickly, but he doesn't flinch and suddenly starts shouting, "I want my part." I didn't understand what he was talking about, and I told him again to get out of here before I call the police. And all of a sudden, he starts laughing like a psychopath. And I repeat to him, but this time shouting, "Get the fucking hell out of here before I call the police." He stops laughing and looks me straight in the eye. And he gradually walks up to me and says, "Where did you hide it? I know that you hid it. Give it to me or I leave you alone." So I answer, "What do you fucking want?" He takes me by the shoulder and shakes me by telling me all the bad words of the world that may exist, repeating that I have hidden something that belongs to him. All of a sudden I hear, "Police, please let the lady." Panicked, the man pushes me to the side and tries to escape. But it was too late, the police had arrived at the doorstep. So I see them immobilising the man and making him go down the stairs. I see my cousin coming out of the kitchen crying with the phone in her hand. She's probably the one who called the police. And as if all the stress was failing, I was crying too. We both hugged at each other and the policeman, who started to try to reassure us, telling it's over now. A few days later, after doing investigation, the police informed us that the man was under several drugs. And the moment we saw him, he was running out of drugs and trying to get it. And what we didn't know is my aunt's apartment belonged before to a drug dealer. That's why he said that he wanted his share and thought I'd hidden it. Nowadays, I have trauma. I go back several times on the door to see if it's really closed. And since this day, I've never met this man again. And I hope this will remain the case.